the aftermath of the Edenic default, Adam and Eve, weighed down by sorrow and humility, led their loyal followers eastward. They did not flee in fear, but withdrew in dignity, choosing peace over conflict when the hostile Nodite tribes threatened war. With the original garden no longer tenable and divine support withdrawn, the Edenic company turned toward the only open route, the lands between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers. Their long journey was marked by hardship and resolve. The caravan moved slowly across the Mesopotamian plains, burdened with children, livestock, seeds, and the aching memory of lost purpose. When they reached the flooding Euphrates, they waited 6 weeks before crossing into a territory that had once been considered a possible site for Eden itself. Providence, it seemed, had preserved a second chance. The indigenous tribes, upon hearing that the sovereigns of Eden were approaching, had fled in fear, abandoning their settlements. Adam and his company entered unopposed. There, in the fertile cradle of Mesopotamia, the second Garden of Eden was born, not a paradise prepared by celestial hands, but a land to be tamed through sweat and toil. The soil was unyielding, the thorns real, and every gain hard-won. Yet from this raw land they carved farms, raised herds, and planted orchards using the preserved life forms of the original Eden. A wall, 56 miles long, was constructed to protect the valley's northern edge where the rivers converged, securing their new homeland. In the second garden, Adam's sons and daughters continued the mission, though now humbled and mortal. Adamson journeyed north to establish a secondary center. Everson became his father's chief administrator, while Seth, born after the default, took up the spiritual mantle, founding a priesthood rooted in health, education, and worship. These Sethite priests became physicians, teachers, and moral guides, a beacon of truth and service in a world largely primitive. Here, family life flourished. Children were nurtured with care, taught skills of living and ideals of spirit. Women held honored roles, and knowledge was treasured. The community preserved literacy, metallurgy, agriculture, and architecture that surpassed anything of their age. The arts and sciences, though wounded, were not lost. The tragedy of Cain and Abel cast a dark chapter over their early years. Cain, son of Eve and the Nodite Cano, slew his younger brother in a moment of rage. The murder shocked the community. Cain, stricken with guilt, left the garden and eventually became a leader among the Nodites, forging peace between his two lineages. Though born of disappointment, the second garden bore fruit. Adam and Eve implemented a final mission: to share the superior genetic legacy of the violet race with the world. Over 1,500 women were selected from surrounding tribes and with divine consent bore children by Adam. These offspring carried Eden's legacy far beyond the garden, seeding what would become the Andite peoples. Adam and Eve lived for centuries in the second garden, guiding, teaching, and laboring. Eve died of heart failure, Adam, some 19 years later, of age. They were buried beneath the temple of worship, the sacred heart of their new homeland. The civilization of the second garden endured for millennia, its influence rippling outward through migrations and cultural exchanges. Though eventually diluted by time and mingling with the evolutionary races, the light of Eden continued to shine through the Andites, who carried its legacy into Europe, India, and the cradle of Sumerian civilization. In the end, the second Garden of Eden was not a failure, it was a bridge. Through sacrifice, perseverance, and quiet triumph, the children of Eden passed their torch to humanity, leaving the world forever changed. When the dust of exile had settled, the children of Adam and Eve did not vanish into the wilderness. They built anew, a civilization between the rivers, luminous and deliberate. The Adamites, descendants of the violet race, brought with them the remnants of paradise, order, knowledge, and the memory of a higher way of life. In the centuries that followed, their settlement flowered into a beacon of culture. Within their walled valley, the air was alive with craft and learning. The potter's wheel turned beside the smith's furnace. Scribes etched symbols into wet clay, shaping the world's third alphabet. The flicker of lamps illuminated woven tapestries, bronze tools and polished vessels, echoes of Eden refined through human hands. The Adamites became the keepers of civilization's first light. From the arts of metallurgy, pottery, and weaving to the birth of architecture itself, their touch transformed the plain into a living city. Their homes stood in ordered rows, gardens flourished with cultivated vines, and the temple rose at the confluence of the two great rivers, a structure of symmetry and reverence, built not to worship idols, but to honor the source unseen. Family life in the second garden was sacred. Children grew in the warmth of enlightened homes, where both father and mother were teachers, not masters. The hearth was a classroom, the field a living lesson. From the time they could walk, the young learned to plow, to heal, to read the stars, and to pray. The Sethite schools became the pride of Mesopotamia, courts of learning where faith, medicine, and science intertwined. In open halls shaded by fig trees, pupils studied the cycles of the moon, the curing of herbs, the laws of balance and breath. These were not superstitions, but the first sciences of civilization. Their system of education, the book tells, has never since been surpassed, and at the heart of it all stood the understanding that health, knowledge, and worship were one. 3 paths to the same divine center. Yet even the brightest flame cannot burn forever against the winds of time. The civilization of the second garden was an artificial dawn, a divine culture transplanted into the soil of a still primitive world. Surrounded by tribes untouched by Eden's teaching, the Adamites faced a steady erosion, not by war, but by mingling. Generation by generation, they sent forth their best, emissaries of peace, not conquest. They traveled north into the highlands and west toward the sea, sowing the seeds of civilization among darker peoples. In so doing, they diffused their strength even as they spread their light. When Adam passed from this world, his presence, the living axis of their unity, was gone. The temple flame still burned, but its keepers grew fewer. The walls of the garden endured, yet the spirit that had raised them began to fade. Over centuries, the once pure violet race merged into the vast tide of humanity, leaving behind the Andites, a mixed but vigorous people who carried forward the torch of progress into Eurasia. Even as the second garden declined, the world it had touched began to awaken. The crafts of the Adamites became the foundation of every later culture. The Sumerian potter, the Akkadian builder, the Egyptian priest, all bore traces of their influence. The early city-states of the Euphrates were built upon the bones of Eden's canals. The written word, the temple plan, the measured brick, each carried an echo of the garden's harmony. There was no fall of man, only the blending of heaven's memory with earth's evolution. In truth, the mission of Adam and Eve did not fail, it transformed. Their blood and their ideals did not vanish. They diffused. The violet spark merged into the stream of human life, ennobling it from within. When all is summed, Adam and Eve made a mighty contribution, hastening civilization, elevating the races, leaving behind a pattern of beauty and purpose that the world still follows in faint remembrance. Millennia passed. The garden grew silent. The rivers shifted. Cities rose and fell. And the sons of Adam were no longer remembered as a people, but as gods. And yet, the legacy remained. In every temple that faced the sunrise, in every tablet inscribed with prayer, in every family that taught its children to seek truth, there lived the spirit of Eden. Its story did not end in the garden, nor in its fall. It became humanity's story, the journey from innocence to wisdom, from divine guidance to self-chosen light. Eden was not lost, it was transmitted. The soil between those rivers, cradle of the second garden, became the birthplace of civilization itself. And in that long dawn of the human race, the children of Eden still whispered their song. The light is not gone, it lives in us.